Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. I know there is a lot to cover in Germany right now and I will definitely do so, but today I want to talk about something else entirely. It is a topic that I've visited sometimes during the last couple of years. I come back to this every now and then because I find it fascinating. And I also thought that as the people in the US are mostly celebrating Thanksgiving now, it would be really a fitting topic. It is the groundbreaking research of the scholar and gentleman Mr. Erdogan from Turkey. He doesn't like computer models, he doesn't like simulations, he wants to do experimental economics on a large scale and not just looking at historic data and time series. No, he wants to create his own data, he wants to do and conduct his own experiment. He is in fact that brilliant that he came up with his own field of economics. It's called Erdonomics or Erdoganomics, depending on who you ask. But before we really get into this fascinating topic, I want to thank all my supporters and my subscribers. Like, share and subscribe and leave a comment down below. If you want to support my work, if you want to see more material like that, then you can support my channel via Patreon or Subscribestar. The links are down below. So I guess his research was inspired by all the talk about negative interest rates, which we are having right now for a long time already, but he started his experiment in fact much sooner, 20 years ago already. And he was way ahead of his time. While the West was still discussing about negative interest rates, he is doing applied research, real world research on negative currency exchange rates. Yes, he wants to find out with Turkey as an experimental setup if there can ever be negative currency exchange rates. We all know what negative interest rates are, right? That means if I need some money and I have to borrow some money, that person who lends me the money is expecting some kind of return payment called interest. And if the interest rates are negative, that means I can borrow money and I'm even paid for that. Unfortunately, private citizens don't really get to enjoy these negative interest rates. They are just on the receiving end of it normally. That means if I'm taking money to the bank wants to be paid for the burden of having to store my money for me. But coming back to the subject at hand now, let's look at the data for a short time. And once again, I don't want to go into all the details because I made many videos over the years about that. You can check them out. We know for a longer time that essential items and food and energy, oil and these things are really increasing in price right now because Turkey has to import a lot of that, and that is paid for in dollars or euro. So we have to look at the exchange rates for the Turkish lira to dollar and euro. Dollar and euro doesn't really vary that much, so I stick to euro right now. So what we see here is that within just a single month, the Turkish lira lost like 20% in buying power, or let's say exchange rate, towards the euro. And within a single year it was around 40% even. That is massive in a single year. And in the past, Mr. Erdogan actually blamed foreign operators and evil forces that conspire against his country, when in fact it is his own experiment, and he shouldn't be that humble. He should proudly and confidently say to the world, I am a scientist, I am a scholar, and I will find negative interest rates. Because if you look at the bulk of the time that he was in power, here it is more than 15 years that I have found, you can see that the exchange rate towards the euro is falling almost precisely in a linear fashion. I mean, of course, there is some undulation, there is some noise, some movement here and there, but overall it is a linear trend and we're approaching zero very soon. So I drew a little triangle here on that plot that tells you how many euros you get for 1 lira, and currently it is 7.2 euro cents. So 0.072 euros. And that linear trend line has a negative slope of minus 0.0336 euros per year. So that is like 3.4 cents a year. Now, if you do the math and you continue from this day onward, that means that in 2 years, following the same trend, we would be at negative exchange rates almost. Isn't that exciting? Only 2 more years. So how would these negative currency exchange rates look like? What would that be? Like if I went to a Turkish person right now and said, hey, I want to exchange €1 into Turkish lira, then I would get, and now we forget about any fees or something, just take the blunt exchange rate, then I would get like 13.9 Turkish lira for €1. But how does this transaction look like if it was like, let's say, 4 years later and the exchange rate would actually be minus 0.072 euros per lira? Well, and this is only my imagination, correct me in the comments down below if you have another opinion on that, but I would think if I would do this kind of currency exchange transaction with a Turkish person then he would have to give me 13.9 Turkish lira and €1. So he would have to give me €1 just so that I take 13.9 Turkish lira from him. That would be a negative exchange rate then. Now I have no idea if any sane person would make that trade, because it's not a trade, it's like one person giving stuff to another person in 2 different currencies. But in my opinion, that is technically what a negative exchange rate would mean. So at the very least, the research of Mr. Erdogan will show us if such a thing exists or not. And then if it doesn't exist, and many people say, of course, it doesn't exist, then it will show us at least when this linear trend will be stopped and when there will be some kind of saturating behavior. Because I find this really peculiar that the exchange rate is falling in a linear fashion. It's not falling by a certain relative amount each year, it's falling by an absolute amount each year. And this is why in former times nobody really worried too much about the exchange rate change, but they only worry about it right now. And that is, well, if you have to do with numbers a lot, then you immediately know what I'm talking about. But let me just make a brief example. So here you see once again that you lose a little more than 3 cents every year for the Turkish lira versus the euro. So in the early 2000s, when you still got around 50 euro cents for 1 Turkish lira, 3 cents per year, well, it's a huge exchange rate change, sure, but it doesn't ultimately change anything. It's like 6%, whoop-de-doo, big deal. But if the exchange rate is at 7 euro cents per Turkish lira and then within a year you lose 3 cents, that's almost half of it, well, then it's almost a 50% loss in buying power from a very near and very large, very important trade partner. That is a big deal, and that can be felt on the streets of Turkish cities every day. You see the relative increases of prices, the relative loss and decline in buying power are so dramatic right now that you can really see it everywhere. And not just since this year, I made these videos in the past, there were problems like not getting enough sesame for a very, very popular snack. There is of course a problem with importing oil, energy prices and so on. People were buying gold and hoarding, people were trying to flee from their own currency. And let me make once again, I did this a couple of years ago already or last year or something, let me once again remind all those Turkish patriots that they know what to do right now. And I don't mean primarily the ones in Turkey, I mean the many, many Turkish patriots, the proud Turks in Europe, like Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, you know where you are, right? If you have any gold, any stocks, any savings in euro, convert them to lira. This is how you help the fatherland right now. That is your duty as a proud Turk. If you don't do that, if by next week you still have €1 to your name and not having converted that into lira, then you are not a proud Turkish patriot, but you are a traitor to your fatherland. Know that much. Invest in Turkey, not in Europe. Sell your gold and take it to a Turkish bank in lira. That's what Erdogan wants, and that is what you should do. So I'm excited what happens in 1 or 2 years if we really break through that line, or if we see a kind of saturating behavior, a deviation from that linear trend. Right now, we're still right on the linear trend that lasts for over 15 years already. Exciting stuff. Let me know what you think about that. Servus, Kameraden.